Okay, this video is going to help you understand what you need to understand for quarter two so far. So here we go. First one is evaluating, where I give you a number to plug in for X and have you do the math. So here I go. To do that one, I write f of -4, because that's the number I'm plugging in for X. 5, no more X there. I write -4. I still have that -3. And now I use my calculator to times 5 times -4. That gives me -20. And then I bring down that -3. And then my final answer, if I keep writing down f of -4, my final answer is f of -4, or when I plug in X is -4, I get spit out Y is -23. That's what we're trying to have you understand. I'm plugging in X and I'm getting spit out the Y number, or the f of X number. So here we go. Next one. No one had a graph using just the X and Y intercepts, but using that method I taught you. So here I go. Knowing that this is the Y axis, this right here is the X axis. To graph using this quick slope intercept method, I find the number that has no X attached to it. And then I put my first dot on that Y axis, either up or down that Y line, depending on what that number is. That number is 2. So I put my first dot as 2. That is my Y intercept. And then as I graph, this -2 right here is my slope. It tells me where to go from that starting point. And then remember, slope, if you write it as a fraction, any whole number is a fraction, that fraction numbers tell you where to go from that starting point. That tells me from 2, I go right on the grid line, and then I go down 2 grid lines. And then right away, right there, right 1 over 2, that is my x-intercept right there. And what this problem wants you to do is graph with only the x and y intercept. I know it's tempting to keep going right 1, down 2, right 1, down 2, or maybe even left 1, up 2, left 1, up 2, but you're not following instructions if you do that. You need to only plot the y-intercept, that one in blue, and the x-intercept, that one in red. So if I draw my line through those, that's my line drawn using only the x and the y-intercept. There's my y-intercept. That coordinate has always x is 0. That's 0, 3. This is my x-intercept, which always has the y number as 0. That's 1, 0. You need to memorize that. Y-intercept, x is 0. X-intercept, the y number is 0. All right, this next concept, domain and range, using what's called interval notation, where I use either square symbols or rounded symbols. All right, so here I go. For domain, domain is measured left to right using the x's, the x numbers on the x-axis. So if I look, the far left of this graph data on the x-axis is way over here at -7. That's the far left boundary. If I look at the right boundary, it's over here at 4. That 4 is the right side of my boundary. It's going from -7 to 4. But then I gotta know this is open right here. So for this one, my domain, I'm gonna write this as square bracket from -7 to 4, and I'm not going to write a square bracket. Don't do that, because this open circle means I write a rounded bracket. So this one is square, this one is rounded. So know that. That's how I need to do that, from -7 to 4 rounded. If this was filled in, then I would do a square bracket right there, but it's not filled in, it's empty. All right, now my range is from the bottom number first to the top number written second. Looking at my y values, the y's. So if I look at this, the far bottom boundary going through the y-axis now, from going up to bottom, is going through 3 right there. And then since that boundary is closed right there, I write a square bracket on that 3 and go all the way up until I see the top boundary on the y-axis, that 8. So that's 3, 8 with both square brackets. And again, I messed up on that one. Let's do that one again. For my range, definitely a little harder on this one. So for my range, I'm going to have to do that in 2 parts. So I'm going from 3, and again, I forgot that opening right there. You got to be careful. 3 up to this 5 right there. So I'm going to write that first one as square bracket on that 3 to that 5, and I'm going to round it right there. And then from there, it's going to continue up through 8. So I'm going to write a rounded bracket from that 5 up to 8, and I'm going to square that bracket. That's a more difficult range where you're going up through a open section from bottom to top. All right, here we go. Next. For these, you need to know all the different parts, like domain measured from left to right, from this -8 to 3. You need to know that range is from bottom to top, from this 2 up to that 9. You need to know that the maximum is the highest point right here. That's the maximum written as a rounded coordinate, never using square brackets, only for domain and range. And then one more thing. And then this end is the minimum, the lowest, written as a coordinate using rounded brackets. You would never use square brackets for coordinates. These are actual coordinates for this data right here being shown. But now intervals, increasing intervals, again, you look at the x numbers. Let the x numbers describe your left to right x numbers. Never use the y numbers for intervals. You're using the x numbers. So increasing from -8 to this -4 going uphill, and then from this -1 to 3, 2 little uphill sections. By decreasing, I'm going from this -4 to this -1, decreasing. All right, let's do an example. Finish this video. So here we go. Looking at this, domain measured left to right using the x numbers. So if I look, this is going from -6 all the way over to 7. So I write that as square bracket from -6 all the way to 7 square bracket. For my range, it looks like I'm going from this -3 all the way up to this 6 right here. So again, range a little bit more difficult because you're going from bottom to top, looking at the y numbers. So I write that -3, and then I write that 6 square bracket from -3 to 6. Remembering again, range, the harder one, you're going from the bottommost number through the y-axis all the way up to where that data has kind of a boundary up atop through the y-axis. That is range. Domain, I look at the x numbers. Domain is the far left boundary where that data kind of goes through the x-axis all the way to the right, where the right side of that boundary hits the x-axis. That's domain, using the x numbers. Range, use the y numbers. For maximum, for this graph here, if I could clean this up a little bit. For maximum, that is the highest point. There's no higher point than this one right here. So I write that as an xy coordinate with normal rounded parentheses. Don't use squares. So that would be left 6 for x, up 6 for y. That is a coordinate. That is the maximum. The minimum is the lowest, written as a coordinate. So that coordinate would be 7 for x, comma, -3 for y, written as a coordinate. Increasing intervals, that is where it's going uphill from left to right. Increasing, going uphill, left to right. I look at the x numbers to describe where that left to right part's starting and where that going uphill left to right part ends. So that would be from this graph from -3 square to +2 using square brackets because there's no opening in any part of that data right there. Decreasing is as I come from it left to right going downhill. That's decreasing. Going downhill, decreasing. And again, I use the x numbers, that numbers on the x axis to show the boundaries where it starts to go downhill and where it ends at that spot. So that would be from -6 to -3, close it. And then I have another downhill section from this -2 to this 7. So from 2 positive to 7, it's another downhill stretch. You got to list them both if there's more than one. All right, I hope this helps. Keep me caught up on what you need to know.